I think whether you're at the stage of having just a concept for a business, right through to the other end of the spectrum, where you've written your business plan and are looking for funding, it's very practically useful to come to these sorts of lecture series.
We've all heard about Dragon's Den and the venture capitalists who appear on that program, but that's just a television show, really. You know, this is the real world. And learning about the alternative sources of capital for new startup ventures it's essential.
If you're trying to set up a business, you should take all the opportunities you've got for help and advice, especially from people who've been out there and done it before. It could be the difference between them securing the funding that they need and not securing the funding that they need.
We all have great ideas for new enterprise, and we all enjoy in developing those ideas. Most ideas for new enterprise require money to bring them into fruition. And often that money is not within the immediate grasp of you, the entrepreneur. Of course, securing investment is only part of the story, as any investment should be made to work. Made to work for the entrepreneur and made to work for the investor. So this evening our speakers, after they have delivered their presentations, will be joining together to form a panel. And then right away you can start asking questions of that panel and comment on the evening as it proceeds. Now, you may think, given all we hear in the media, that we should all be desperately leaving the country and heading east to China or to India. This is what the world would look like, or will look like, in 2015, so only a couple of years from now, and the data sources are the IMF and the United Nations, if each country was sized according to gross domestic product. As you can see, Europe is, depending on how you cut the figures, the world's largest trading zone. Despite having zero growth, pretty much zero growth, we are, in Europe, the world's largest trading zone. $14 trillion, about the same size as the United States in actual fact. And the same population as the United States, about 300 million. So, we're in actually a pretty good location when we're looking at businesses. This is what happens after they get the money. 40% are still written off as a loss. That's after they've been through all the rigmarole of managing to get an investor. So what happens? Now again, Mason and Harrison found that 60% of business plans are rejected after a 30-minute review. By the way, I'm not here to put you off becoming an entrepreneur. Might sound like it, but I'm not. I do want to inject a degree of realism, because people on the other side of the table who have to look at these business plans keep finding the same old errors over and over again, which is a lack of realism. So 60% were rejected after a 30-minute review, 25% are rejected after a 3-hour appraisal, 10% are rejected after a full-day evaluation, 3% are rejected following failed negotiations, and 2% succeeded in raising funds. 2% who went to angel investors succeeded in raising funds. At this point, you might want to know where the rocket science department at King's is, because it's going to be easier to become a rocket scientist. 2% succeed. So we want to know, what is it that they're doing which is so right? So actually, first of all, that they got their valuations right. They weren't unrealistic on valuations. What they found is that a pre-revenue seed business, and there'll always be exceptions to this, I'm only reporting what sources have discovered, pre-revenue seed businesses should be valued at between £350,000 to £750,000. Now what you'll do, of course, is try and convince someone that before you've had a single sale, if you do a discount cash flow on your 5th year, or even better, 10th year, if you can manage to get away with it, 10th year revenues, and discount it forward to the present day, and discount rates are incredibly low at the moment because interest rates are incredibly low, then your business today should be worth about 10 million just because you registered a good, clever URL. Angels don't seem to be buying that. So what are the most common reasons then that people end up in the 98% who never manage to raise money and their proposals are rejected? Here were some of the things that the angels said. A lot of this will be familiar to you. It will be definitely familiar to my panelists because they'll be the ones who'll be telling you all of this. when they're rejecting your investments. But just a quick rundown. Lack of skills in the management team, no track record or proof of concept, financial forecast based on weak assumptions, the usual, if I can only sell to 1% of the population, that kind of rubbish. Inadequate financial returns, too complex, not scalable, lack of trust, lack of market awareness, no clear exit route. What not to say in your business plan. And these are actually taken from real business plans. This is a wonderful and exciting opportunity. They all are. Just give the facts and let people make up their own minds. There is no competition. You'll know this. Some of you will know this. There is no competition, really. You've not looked hard enough, and that worries me. Can you afford not to invest? Guess what the answer is going to be to that? The product will sell itself. Well, then don't need you. Our target market is X million. Really? We will achieve a return of X million for the investor after 5 years. Where they're giving absolute guarantee, they're stating it in guaranteed terms, it smacks of overconfidence. And you're looking to go into business. Very often you're in a rush and you end up forgetting that this is something which is going to require a lot of passion that you want to do for the rest of your life. And if that's the case, then pick it carefully. If it's something which you think you're doing just to make money, then for God's sake, get a job. If it's something you're doing for fulfillment, then take your time to pick the right business. The other piece of advice I'd give you is, do please feel free to get in touch with me, thedealdaddy.me. Some of us have a sort of odd sense of humour, myself included. That's my unofficial blog of a British government deal maker. And on there, there's downloadable financial forecasting tools, Excel spreadsheets, business plans, British Venture Capital Association Guide to Raising Finance, and all sorts of other information on grants, incentives, incubators, and all the rest of it, which I didn't want to bore you with on this talk, but on that blog and website, thedealdaddy.me, you'll find all of that. So with that, thank you very much, and I'll look forward to the Q&A. Thank you.
Amadeus is an investor in technology businesses in the UK and continental Europe. The things that work for venture investments are things that can produce a very high return because the risk is very high and the fallout rate is very high. So prior success, maybe on a more modest scale, is really well correlated with successful outcomes. Turns out that had been studied and found to be the case in the US. Turns out it's exactly the same in Europe. The next really, really important thing is that there's a big opportunity. There is a market need for what you're producing. And that's best expressed by an underserved need in the market, and the entrepreneur really connects with the customers or potential customers and understands them. I'll just mention something about the financing environment today, and by today I mean all time since the past 5 or so years since the financial crisis began. So the environment we're in, and I think we're in for the foreseeable future, is that if your company is developed and you're at the sure thing stage, where you don't really need the money, but if you raise money, there's a clear market opportunity, a clear opportunity for you to invest it and do even better, you can raise money for that, like Alpesh said. So sort of later stage things, growth stage financing, where you're not desperate for money. The other area where you can raise money is at the very early stage, where you can be capital efficient and you can raise money from friends, family and fools, basically. Or maybe free money that you, as Alpesh put it, money that you've got. People who will trust you because they know you and are prepared to take a punt on you. And you can raise money for that. Now, the stuff in between those two is a really hard place to be in the financial environment that we're in. So my advice to you is don't go there. So raise what you can from friends, family, fools, maybe seed funds, that kind of thing, and make it last until you can reach break even on your business. And then when you don't need to raise money, You don't need to raise money, but you're raising it on an opportunistic basis, then look at raising more money. When you're raising money at whatever stage it is, a really bad attitude is the I win, you lose attitude. I'm trying to get money from you. If I get money from you, that's great, and I'm then not interested in you, the investor. It's just terrible. Good investors always try to sniff that out. Sometimes entrepreneurs manage to hide it from them and kind of have that attitude and they still raise the money. It always tends to end in tears when that happens. So Autonomy was started by a guy called Mike Lynch, who's Irish. He's sort of in an Irish immigrant family in the UK. It's a very well-known company. Lots of you will have heard about that. He was super capital efficient at startup. He likes to tell this story about borrowing £2,000 from a bloke he met in a pub and starting up on that. And he really did get sort of technical consulting type work initially as the way to fund his business. And he only raised outside money, in fact from Apex, from me at Apex in the mid-90s, when he didn't need the money, but it was an expansive opportunity for him. The last thing I just want to mention is if you failed previously to raise money, what should you do? Focus on getting your product right, and it's fit with a market need, right, is what I would say. Go back and do that, and keep your kind of costs really, really low, and then try again when you have found a better fit, and listen very carefully to the signals that the market is sending. Okay.
I was in the States when the concept of Kickstarter was just coming to life, that just launched, and I had predicted it would fail because I couldn't understand why people would give money when there was no product, you had no ownership in the business, and it just didn't compute. I was completely wrong because as evidence, last year Kickstarter actually had pledges of $319 million, out of which $274 million was collected, so effectively money flowed. That sort of spurred me to start thinking, is there a game here to be played with regards to taking that model and applying to early stage equity business. If you wanted to raise money from friends, family and fools, you could probably get access to it. It's small amounts of money. If you start to get traction, there are other angel investors and VC firms who will pick you up. If you're in that valley of death in the middle, you struggle. And there are a lot of people out there with ideas who are needing a little bit more money but not quite there yet before they get picked up in the whole ecosystem. So Crowdbank was sort of born out of that to say, if even like 10% of the 25,000 viable businesses that are failing to find finance can get finance through their extended network, through supporters, then there'd be more value added to society and basically create more entrepreneurs. That's the idea. All the stuff that Alpesh and Richard said about the business plans, about the work that we do, doesn't change for crowdfunding. I think we've got 136 entrepreneurs we're speaking to at the moment in the deal pipeline. And quite a few of them come up and say, there you go, listed on your platform, then I'll come back in 90 days and collect the money. I think fair to say some of them have gone on the platform and they haven't moved because they didn't do any work on it. You need to then condense that business plan into what is known in the industry as elevator pitch, or what we call the story, how you tell your story. So the consumers for crowdfunding platforms generally will give you about 30 seconds on average eyeballing on the website. If you don't come across to them very clearly, concisely why that service or product adds value and is kind of exciting and getting engaged in, you lost them. Once you have got that right, then you've got to figure out your target demographic. And what I mean by that is, where are your investors, supporters, customers, whatever you want to call it. Crowdfunding obviously merges your traditional investors and your advocates and your customers all into one. So it's a financial as well as a marketing tool. And the key thing you're getting out of crowdfunding is validation of your idea very cheaply. And the worst thing that can happen is your ego takes a beating and you go back to the drawing board and realize that what you thought was an amazing idea isn't, because most people say it isn't. So you've got to listen to that. It turns out for us, we kind of did private crowdfunding, so friends family and fools and their friends, and my business school buddies. But it took some people to come in after 6 months when they realized I wasn't joking around and we'd actually built the platform. So you have to account for the time for people to take, even though you think they're their best mates. They may not come in straight away. So you almost need a map at the outset to say, who's going to give me money easily? That's my mum. Who's going to give me money after 3 months? That's my B-school buddies. Who's going to give me money after 4 weeks because they're actually going to use my service? And have a very clear view of how and who will give you money. Finally, there are some things you need to think about are legal implications. If you're doing an equity raise, then you make sure you investigate and do due diligence on the platforms, because the platforms are very young at the moment and the regulation is unclear on certain things. So make sure that you're happy, take legal advice, regardless of what the platforms tell you, to make sure that you're in the right. I'll leave you with one success story we had. There's an app that raised £10,000 on our platform in 19 minutes, and I had phone calls from the other people saying they cheated. And my answer to that was, I have evidence to suggest they worked for 6 weeks doing the marketing plan that we talked about, in terms of planning where the investors were, the supporters were. They went to them, they prepped them before the listing went on, and that's why they got the money in the time that they did. And that's the hard work that you need to do to get crowdfunding going. It's an amazing thing, it's very disruptive, anybody can do it, it democratizes finance in a way that hasn't been done before. It doesn't change the rules of the game. Your failure rate is still exactly the same, the amount of work that you're required to do is exactly the same, except you're talking to a different set of investors and supporters who perhaps might give you more of a chance. So I'll leave you with that.
So we've had a Twitter running, as you all know, throughout the evening, and there's been many discussions going through. And one question has come through on a tweet, so they put their hand up first. I don't know who it is in the room. You will know who it is when I speak your question, which is, I think it's a great question. It says, if I can raise more money than I need short term, should I take it and keep it for later, or should I wait? Richard, do you want to kick off with that?
Yes. You should take it.
Alpesh?
I certainly wouldn't disagree with Richard. I'd probably just qualify it slightly in this. If you're paying for that money, then you're probably paying at a relatively high valuation because you're raising it at an earlier stage. And so it may end up being expensive money, which if you could raise later because you didn't need it early on, it might be better to wait. The problem with that is that later on, there's a cost to the time and effort needed to raise that money. So whilst I would be inclined to grab as much as I could, as quickly as I could, it might be more cost effective in terms of how much of your company you're having to give away to wait and raise as little as possible because you want to own as much of your company when it comes to banking it and exiting.
I think the crowdfunding answer to the question is slightly different. So if you're doing a rewards crowdfunding raise, obviously some platforms don't have a cap, so you could go as mental as the Pebble Watch, people who've heard in Kickstarter, that started with 100,000 and raised 10 million. The key thing to keep in mind there is the fulfillment cost and the fact that you'll be there delivering those 10,000 watches when you could be going and building a business. From an equity perspective, it doesn't work because it caps at what you said you would raise, so you can't actually raise more than what you said. The key thing there is you may not want to do, if you could, if a platform allowed it, you may not want a crowdfunded raise which is more, because the VCs would suddenly start to see, rather than 100 people, you now have 10,000 people, and it starts to get discouraging for subsequent rounds.
Maybe I'll expand on my answer just a little bit. So within reason, it's good to take more money if you have that opportunity, because generally, no matter what it says on the spreadsheet, and what Alpesh just outlined is what it says on the spreadsheet, that it costs you and so on, and you could do better, you could optimise it. But things do tend to take longer and cost more. That's just the way of the world.
Thanks very much. That was my question, and I will qualify it a bit, or complement it by something else. Because one other thing is I have a completely, well, I learned that it's called a lean approach, that you do minimum MVP, and test, make inexpensive errors, try again. So, and that's why people want to invest in my company. And because of that, my approach would be typically to say, oh, I will spend, I don't know, 10,000 on this. If it works, then I'll spend 20,000. If it works, and leverage on. And I found this approach actually doesn't work well with the business plan approach or capital raising, because, well, you don't want to raise capital all the time, so you want to raise one sum of money. So do you see there's a slight opposition between the lean approach and sometimes raising capital?
Can I take that? I think that's a great question. I'm personally an enormous fan of what Eric Ries, articulated in Lean Startup of the minimum viable product, and you focus your best productivity with your early money is learning. And if you think about it, this is evolution. It's a sort of Darwinistic approach. The more a species can learn and develop and survive in the harsh world and adapt is, the better it will do. So evolution is very good. It's much more effective than the business plan approach, which is which is this sort of intelligent creation and that kind of know-it-all, design the perfect machine approach. And as humans in the uncertain environment in which we live, that is nigh on impossible to do. So although everybody's classes and financial classes that value, where you learn about valuation, you have a business plan and you predict the cash flows for 5 years forward and you get a terminal value and all that stuff. The future is so bloody uncertain that just, we all know that it doesn't really work. So some of this is sort of going through the motions of a business plan to raise the money, but really, a lot of the raising the money is about the trust of the investor in the individual and the market opportunity, and the fact that the individual is going to figure it out, is going to go through that iteration cycle, very, very, very quickly. So that's my view on that question.
To what extent is there a risk of crowdfunding making the share cap table a little bit difficult for later investors?
This is one of the most asked questions in terms of, if I crowdfund, am I then cutting myself off from serious investments further on? Alpesh's point is very right in the sense that some of the VCs and serious investors we've talked to would prefer less shareholders in the share cap table. That said, we believe that it's an IT problem, and largely because legally there are ways to get around it. So you can have pooling, you can have drag and tag along rights, you can have exits, which we put in our term sheets that they get. But it's people get afraid, how are they going to manage 1,000 people in terms of comms, corporate actions, investor relationships? That's where the power of platforms come in, because they redo all of that for you, because otherwise, as a startup, you just go under.
First of all, the speakers were fantastic. What they did was really offer not only inspiration and motivation, but really their tips and advice on how to start a business, how to get funding, which is obviously the key essence of today, especially in the enterprise industry, and just really give an overall view of what the economy is like in terms of entrepreneurs. I
felt it was a very insightful conference. Learned a lot from that. I definitely would recommend anybody to come in and perhaps experience that. The notepad's full, so that's always a good look.
Definitely. I mean, it's all networking, and I can see, reasons for me to come again, and I can see reasons why I'd recommend it to various clients of mine who are looking to raise money themselves.
I thought it was great, contained lots of practical advice and tips from the experts. The panel of speakers was very good, and they reached out to the audience. I like the fact that the audience were allowed to participate and ask questions via tweeting, and I thought it was a really enjoyable evening.
I think entrepreneurship now is becoming the next big thing, especially with today's economy. There are so many possibilities for students to go into entrepreneurship. It doesn't matter what field you're in, as long as you're motivated and passionate and you're willing to really put a lot of work into it. I think there's a lot of potential for students to grow themselves as well as their businesses, and I think it will add extreme amount to the economy.
I've really enjoyed it, actually. I came along because my dad sent me an email saying that he was coming along. He's a self-employed businessman, and I think he really wants to take the opportunity to have the advice. I'm still a student at the moment, and it's a far cry away from what we listen to in the lectures. It was very, very interesting to hear about it. I don't at the moment have any particular business aspiration, but it's always interesting to know what's going on out there. Things like Kickstarter remain very alien to most of us. It sounds like something that's very, very far away, but to see actually how it works and the sort of people that are going into it and the opportunities that it presents is incredibly interesting.
With Kickstarter, it's you're giving people prizes, they're not actually part of the business, whereas with crowdbank, people are part of the business. And I think the questions that were being asked about all the investors that and shareholders that you basically have is, I think, kind of was a bit confusing to me, so I hadn't seen that. But I do think that maybe for what we want to try and do, crowdfunding would probably be the best way to go.
Number one is contacts. I think obviously we're just in the networking phase right now. I've met a few people, also the speakers. It's about, if you have contacts, you can really get a clear connection into funding, and also you can meet other people that will help you along the way. And I think secondly is learning as much as you can, and I think these type of events you'll get the most benefit out of.